You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry. It was a nice talk with Will.
Yeah, that was fun. And we'll get him back in here again and do some other things with him as the days go by.
Coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to be talking with a gentleman who interviewed Chris Kyle. You know that name is the American Sniper, the subject of the very, very popular and successful movie. So we'll be talking with Toby Harnden, and we'll have some other great guests coming up in the next few weeks as well. But I wanted to talk about a disturbing story that has been written recently. The Jews in Europe are not feeling safe anymore. And this is, of course, highly disturbing to me because it only comes 70 years after the Holocaust, and there are still people alive from the Holocaust who get to witness the rebirth of anti-Semitism in Europe.
Yes.
And I think it's abhorrent. I'm going to spell it right out for you folks. The Muslims, and I'm not talking about all Muslims, I'm talking about a portion of the Muslim community, have taken over the role of the Germans 70 years later in Europe.
And you're not alone in saying that. I mean, this past week, the White House put out a statement to that effect, comparing them to Nazis. And it's coming from both sides. Conservatives are saying it. You are not alone in that analysis, Al.
And the Jews have always made good scapegoats throughout history. For whatever ails anybody, they can always point at the Jews. Even when the Jews were almost completely eliminated, I'm sure if even every Jew was eliminated from the face of the earth, people would still be talking about the Jews. Yeah. And how they, the root of all evil and all that other nonsense.
I mean, Adolf Hitler tried it.
I can tell you this. This is highly disturbing, as I said. I'm going to give you an example. Here in Paris, here's a gentleman named Zvika Klein from Jewish news outlet NRG, silently walked for 10 hours down the streets of Paris. He wore a head cap, which they call a yarmulke or a kippah on his head. He wore ritual tassels on his shirt. The clip shows anti-Semitism is rife in the city of Paris. He's intimidated and spat at. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Europe is no longer safe for Jewish people. There is one of the quotes is, "What is he doing here, mommy?" as he's walking along. Everything's being recorded. Doesn't he know he will be killed? There's a footage showing him being spat at. He's being called a dog, and he's threatened as he walks down the streets of Paris. Well, Reagan, this is horrendous.
It is. So go ahead.
I wanted to mention what you mentioned before the show. This is a very good point that you brought up about the immigration in Europe.
A generation ago, the birth rate in Europe fell lower than all the rest of the world. And because of that, the governments in France and Holland and England and Germany invited Arabs and Muslims to come to take the factory jobs. And they came by the hundreds of thousands. But they didn't just come. In England, it got so far as to wanting Sharia law to live under instead of the English laws. And that is a serious, serious problem. And now we're seeing side effects.
So let's keep our eye on this, shall we?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time this week. And we'll invite you to see us 1 week hence on the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area, seen 3 times a week on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And in studio with us this day, our very special guest is the general manager of Tough TV 38, Will Strickler. Will, thank you for being with us today. As we were wrapping up that last segment there, did we give you a chance? Did you get a chance to finish your thought there? Or did you want to?
No. It's over the last year, I've shared some things with you guys about the psychic world. And growing up, I grew up, like I say, outside of Philadelphia. My grandparents came from Trenton, and they were mediums, psychics, I'd say more mediums, back in the 20s and 30s. And back in their day, they lived in a row house in Trenton, and people used to hang out in the people's kitchens to get together every night. So they would have the mayor over, or they would have the police chief, they would have... I even heard about some nuns coming over. I mean, I wasn't there, so I'm just taking it for what my mom told me.
Sure.
And I would hear about all these stories about the psychic world. My mother was not involved with that, but she would tell me stories about my grandparents. And one story was the Lindbergh baby, that my grandfather said that baby never left the property alive.
And this is Charles Lindbergh's baby. Charles Lindbergh, the first man to fly solo over the Atlantic, and his kid went missing, was kidnapped.
Right.
And there was a big nationwide search for this child.
Right, and it was actually in an area right outside of Trenton. So my grandfather told the policeman that was there, or the police chief, said, "Hey, you need to be looking around the property because the baby didn't leave the property, or it's real close." That's what I'm saying. So they ultimately found the baby bird within a visual sight of the house. And I said, "Mom, why didn't I ever hear of this, in the news or anything?" And she said, "Well, your grandfather said that if he said anything about where the Lindbergh baby was, they would think he had something to do with it."
They would think he was the guy that did it. Sure.
Right. So that was the one thing that I remember growing up. But, there were so many stories, and it was like every day is a new story.
Oh, yeah. And the hoax, it was only about 10 days after this terrible hoax of the baby being alive that they found the baby dead. Mm-hmm. A year or so ago, Al, there's a brand new book out about research on especially on the Lindbergh trial and Bruno Richard Hauptmann. And they claim that there's new evidence that Hauptmann probably is not the murderer. But, we went through the trial of the century, as they called it, there in the early 30s. Of course, every few years we have the trial of the century. But it was the biggest. I mean, Charles Lindbergh, for over 20 years, was the most well-known and arguably the most popular man in America and in many places all around the world. Everybody knew what was going on here, and the business of a crime trial was a nasty thing for everybody involved, and so for your family to be right there and so close to it is rather an incredible story.
Yeah, they came over from Scotland and England in the back in around 1918, and it seems like the UK, there's a lot of spiritual churches, and people just seem to be more on the spiritual realm. So I never had a resistance towards it. I mean, basically, and I was even going to be a minister. So the spiritual thing was always something that I was involved in.
I can give you a personal endorsement from when I first came to Orlando, and I was working on in those days, more people still listened to AM than listened to FM, and I really dated myself there. But the number one station in Orlando still played music in the daytime. 7 to midnight was the talk block in those days, see? And they had a night show host who had an alcohol problem and frequently didn't show up. And so I would get asked to stay from the newsroom and do the talk show at night. The most response I would ever get, you'd open the phones and take the calls and you'd have guests, but the most popular shows were when we would have a psychic in the studio, and people would call and want their questions answered, or a little bit of what's going to happen to me tomorrow. Easily tied up the phone lines for all 5 hours. So,
is that right?
Oh, yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Very interesting.
Absolutely. So this is you're onto something with this, and there is a deep-seated interest, as far as I know, it has been for a long time in this kind of stuff.
Well, and locally we have Casadega here in
Yes.
Central Florida, which is a spiritualist community that's been around for almost 100 years, and not many people know about it. It's up by Deltona.
Right.
And,
yeah, they have church service up there every Sunday, so people just want to go up and go to church, and they give random readings there. But one thing I found very interesting was I found that when I would go to groups, there would be 12 women to every guy. Women are very more open-minded. They're more, I mean, in my opinion, more spiritual, and guys just need to open up and say, hey, there's nothing wrong with having feelings or trying to sense things. But it was 12-1.
Wow.
Well,
And-
men are taught to put their feelings inside and then put a tough exterior outside,
Right. So
which I think is an incorrect
so there's
way
more,
to do it. But
So when I tell people, and we'll get on to the other story I told you about my friend Charisse, that there are things out there that that happen or we don't even know about, but they exist.
well, let's talk about your friend Charisse and
Well,
an experience that happened with
yeah,
you.
about 4 years ago, my wife had just died, and my sister sent me this article about Brian White's past life regression. So I went to the seminar at the Orange County Convention Center, and the guy says, look, we're going to do a little thing right now. Find somebody you never met before. Hold a piece of their jewelry or something. I said, okay. So I hold this girl's jewelry, and he's doing this very slow, hypnotic dialogue. All of a sudden, I start seeing things. Well, he said, look, whatever you see, tell the other person you saw it, because it might mean nothing to you, mean everything to them. So I said, okay. So one thing I saw was a girl standing on black rocks on a beach that wasn't in Florida. She pulls out her business card, and there it is, her business card of her on the black rocks in the Caribbean.
Show that to the camera there. Interesting. Yeah. So there's a connection right there.
Wow.
So I'm like saying, okay, this
Look
is
at that.
somebody I never met before.
Yeah.
And she pulls out her card. I mean, what are the chances of that? But wait, there's more. I said, okay. Well, she starts crying, and I go, okay, this is what else I got. Since I'm on a roll, I might as well tell you. I saw a laser light show and a pyramid. She starts crying again. She pulls out her cell phone. On her cell phone, she had pictures of where she was in Egypt 4 months earlier, and out her window, she took pictures of the pyramid, and at night, they have a laser light show on the pyramids.
Wow. Wow.
And I kept the card, and I kept those photos because that's proof. I mean, it's not something, it wasn't a fixed thing, or you're trying, skeptics out there say, well, that didn't happen. I have the proof. So those are some of the things that happened to me.
That's very interesting. And I want to also, another Central Florida connection, your dad was involved in the space industry. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my father was, he was like this rocket scientist guy. And he worked with Martin. And in the early 60s, he worked at the, in Washington, D.C. He was a weight engineer. And he put together this government industry board. And he was very influential back in the early 60s, where the Russians were ahead of us. And all of a sudden, we're on the moon before them, because he brought everybody together, the Army, Navy, Air Force, private industry. And those guys were in Washington. And on the political side of things, I said, Pop, did you know Kennedy? He goes, yeah. Well, I knew Kennedy, but if you wanted something done, you go to LBJ. He wasn't a big fan of Robert McNamara, but when he wanted something done, he went to LBJ.
Interesting. And of course, after Kennedy was gone, LBJ moved about half of the space program away from Florida out to Texas there for obvious reasons. Yeah.
Right, and we still have Houston. Yeah, of course. There's the big industry there. So.
It was kind of interesting. I asked him, "Hey, Pop, you believe in aliens?" Well, I think he pretty much was under a hush order. He really didn't say too much. He knew von Braun, and von Braun was not. He didn't like von Braun too much.
Yeah, I heard von Braun wasn't a very nice guy. SS guy and all.
So then, but he was into the Edgar Casey things about Atlantis and stuff like that. Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Hold on to that thought. We'll come back and talk some more about these things, but we have to pause along the network line here and remind folks that they're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area, we're seen on Tough TV 38 3 times a week. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And our very special guest in studio today is the general manager of Orlando's Tough TV 38, Mr. Will Strickler. We'll continue in a moment. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And our very special guest in studio today, the general manager of Tough TV 38, Mr. Will Strickler. And Will, we're having an enjoyable conversation with you and learning about your background and notions of TV today.
Let's talk about how our show is put together for Tough TV. We have 2 cameras rolling. They go onto memory cards, and then what happens from there?
I send them over to Tampa, which is our master control. Engineer over there is Corey. He edits them. And
let's give Corey a shout. What's Corey's name?
Corey.
But what's his last name?
I don't know his name.
Well,
that's
hello to Corey.
Corey. Yeah, there you go.
So then what they do in the digital world, they upload files to a server here in Orlando, South Orlando. So there isn't any tape anymore. It's all in digital media. I've been very fortunate to work with a good group of people, and specifically Sue Lupia, who's over in Master Control in Tampa. It's kind of strange how the whole situation happened. Like I mentioned earlier, my wife Sharon had died 2009, and it turned out that the engineer that was activating the channel in Orlando came from the same town that she lived in Georgia, Warner Robins. So it's like, here's this guy calling me up to run this station in Orlando. He came from the same little town in Georgia that I had never heard of before, other than 15 years ago. And so this is one of those cosmic kind of like connections, and that's how I'm doing the station today.
Warner Robins, Georgia. What is that? What are they known for?
Air Force Base. So her father was in the Air Force, a big base up there. She went to dental hygiene school up there in Macon State College.
And so Sue is your counterpart. She's the GM of Tampa then?
Right. So I work with her pretty much on a daily basis. I take care of things here. She puts things together to make sure everything gets submitted in rotation, and she's a great lady to work with.
And tell us about your other endeavor. You obviously are a big guy in the cable business, supplying cable and programming to businesses all over the area.
Yeah, back in '86, I was the guy that wrote the operating specifications for the world's first fiber optic cable system that was created in Hunters Creek, Florida. And it was a joint venture with Bell South.
And then tell us what else you're doing. And also you give yourself a plug for your company.
Well, it's Primetime Cable, and we supply apartment complexes, condominiums with cable services from one coast to the other.
Large, small, what size?
We've had some. We did Orange Lake Country Club back in the 80s, I believe, the largest timeshare resort in the world on one property. We did the Marriott World Center, which at the time was the largest hotel in the South back in 1986. So I've been in this business in one way or another since '69.
And how do people get a hold of you if they are interested in adding programming to their complex or business?
Well, they can go on to primetimesf.com, and they'll be able to find us or send me an email.
And what about, what's your email?
Primetimecable@me.com.
Okay, and what about a phone number?
407-240-4040.
407-240-4040. Prime time. You
Cable.
Said cable. SF.
Right, or primetimecable@me.com.
All right, there you go. We got all the info out. So what do you foresee happening with the local TV station? You guys going to keep growing it?
There's some strange things going on with the FCC now with auctioning off spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So some TV stations, low power stations, they might disappear. And it's kind of like the low power stations were created so people in the community could run a station. And that might be taken away because the big corporations are coming in, they're buying up spectrum for more cell space. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a conflict.
Now, also before you go, tell us about your Haitian programming for the Haitian community, which is growing here in Central Florida.
Yeah, we have two dot channels. 38.1 is the digital channel for Tough TV. 38.2 is a Haitian channel. And this gentleman, Landry, he puts on programming on the station. But one thing that I'd like to reach out to people for on the show is if somebody has a show that would really be interesting to people or supply some kind of like public service or something like that, then I'm open for it. I mean, my thing is mental health awareness. I mean, I work pretty closely with Glenn Close, the actress, and we run her PSAs. So in today's world, we know that there's a lot of people with mental problems, and people are afraid to talk about it. Well, I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have reached that point where we once again have to pause along the network line. But Will Strickler, the general manager of Tough TV 38, thank you for sharing with us today. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio as opposed to just on the other side of the glass for a change here. And we are grateful being on Tough TV 38 with you.
Well, guys, thanks for having me today.
This is the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And if you'll stay put, Al and I will be back with a closing thought following these messages. We're back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And Al, as promised, joining us in studio today is a gentleman that has been here with us every week for, more than a year now. And we thought it might be kind of a unique sort of a thing to have a chat with the general manager of Tough TV 38, Mr. Will Strickler. Will, nice to have you with us in the studio today.
Gentlemen, it's kind of strange to be on this side of the glass.
It is. Well, for starters, you go ahead and take the first couple of minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your personal background and how it is you came to Tough TV.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Philadelphia in a town called Levittown. Day after I graduated from high school, moved to Florida. My Florida worked at Martin Marietta at the time. And I went to UCF or FTU, which what it used to be known as back in '68 for electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Then I got into cable TV, computers, and then eventually running a TV station at TV 38. And it's always great to come up here once a week to learn. I've learned so much. I mean, you have such interesting guests that I look forward. This is the one morning I can actually get an education.
It motivates you to drive from St. Cloud, which is quite a ways away from the studios.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, when you guys had Jesse Ventura and Roger Stone, Alan Grayson, these are some really big hitters, and they have a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's why we like to share that. And, of course, our philosophy has been, and we hope that, obviously, you guys at Tough TV 38 enjoy this, the notion that the guest gets more than a 10 or 15-second soundbite, we try to ask the important questions, but give them the opportunity to speak their mind and allow our audience to make up their own minds whether they like it or not.
You guys having a history background, you definitely can hold a good conversation with them and ask the right questions. And it's a very interesting show.
Well, let me ask you this, Will. What got you interested in running a TV station?
Well, when I started in '68, my father had a TV store, so I went from TVs to satellite TV to cable, fiber optic television, and now I'm on the content side, which is really kind of neat. So I've kind of like done it all when you come to television and content and broadcast and transport.
What type of programming is on Tough TV besides, of course, Florida Roundtable?
It's a manly channel. Hunting, fishing, sports. It's a national network out of Atlanta.
For manly men and manly women.
Yes. Nothing wrong with that.
And how long has Tough TV been around?
I think we're on to 2 years here in Orlando.
And so the network's been around a couple years, and you're seeing some success then.
Yeah, the network out of Atlanta, they must have like 60 affiliates around the country. And Lucille's that started the network was a producer for ESPN. So he's got a huge library of sporting events.
Is it tough? I mean, there's so much out there today with the internet and all of the electronic. I can't even start to list them. I say Twitter and Facebook and twaddle doddle, or who knows what all.
I don't think you're on any of it, are you, Reagan?
No, I am on Facebook.
Are you?
You can,
Okay.
you can find me on Facebook. But I mean, how tough is that making life for television stations?
Well, you only have so many viewers, and now that the options have gotten so many options are out there with the internet, and now you can watch television on your phone or on your iPad, TV anywhere basically. You have to have really good programming, and you develop a following. I actually had a guy tell me that he was getting his tires changed at a pretty big department store, and in the waiting room, they had Tough TV on. Mm-hmm. So it kind of like fits the car thing and the hunting and fishing, and to me, it's how Spike used to be when it first started. That those were the events. Those were the things that they started out with.
What did Spike become? It's not quite that type of programming anymore, right?
Yeah, it's just more movies, I guess. I just haven't really watched that in the last few years. Usually I'm on. You guys got me hooked on more of the watching the talk shows, or I'll watch Fox News, and then I started following Roger Stone because he's quite a unique individual.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Well, when you go shopping to create programming and whatnot, what sort of things are you looking for? How do you share a little bit of the thought process with us?
Well, I used to run a cable system in Hunters Creek in Orlando, which was the world's first fiber optic cable system from '86 until 2000. And I got very connected with the community. So when I look for programming, I look at things that are beneficial to the viewers. Like I do a Florida Summit Collegiate Baseball League. And it's really big in towns like Leesburg or DeLand with retirees, because they're retirees from up north. And up north baseball is really big.
Sure.
So I do that. I do AAU football because, the kids want to see themselves on TV. And your show is very educational for your listeners. And that's why I put it on my TV station, is because you have a value. I find a lot of things on television now really don't have value. They're just filling in space.
Yeah. The creative process is not an easy one, and it's obviously one that you came to through a number of years and being in a number of different locations.
Yeah, I was actually in the music business too, and one of our artist was the original lead singer, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Okay.
So I got into writing songs, the lyrics, and I had a partner that actually put together the music side of things. So, it's evolved over the years, and like I say, I have more fun doing a TV station than doing cable because, it's always something nice to see on the creative side.
As you go through that, currently, anyways, do you have a favorite that jumps out at you, that you see, something that you say each week, oh, my show's on, or I have to see that one?
Well, I liked your Jesse Ventura show and the Roger Stone. But then again, Alan Grayson last week, John Morgan with the medical marijuana, which I think practically everybody I knew back in my school days in the late 60s, early 70s smoked dope, and now they're kind of like running major corporations. So to me, it doesn't seem to be that bad.
Yeah.
Now they're all in pain, so that's the reason they smoke it.
So, so what? Yes, it happens to all of us. So what happens with Tough TV now? What are you guys' plans for locally and nationwide?
Well, I have a 5-year contract with the Summer Baseball League, AU football. The championship games are usually held at the Citrus Bowl. We're actually looking at a tailgating show with on the sports side of things.
Yeah, that's right. I think that guy Al Spry might be doing some
So
hosting
this
with
guy
it.
Al Spry, and the way I got involved with that, I went up to a Philadelphia Eagles game, and I was in the parking lot where they shot the Silver Lining Playbook, and I'm walking around the parking lot, and here's this guy that had this old fire truck, and he had it all decked out in Eagles stuff, and out of the water tanks, he was pumping beer, and he in the back where they would throw the hoses, he had a hot tub. So I figured, hey, this is the life for me, is going around and checking out what people do creatively, because they're driven by their passion of going to the football games.
Yeah, it's a great concept. What do you find is the best way to attract viewers to Tough TV? What have you found?
Well, Lou up in Atlanta gave us what I call a Tough Mobile. So it's all decked out with Tough TV. Driving down the road gets a lot of people interested. People stop me, or they see me stopped in a parking lot and say, hey, what's that all about? So it's really a lot of just getting out there and people seeing what you do and asking, what's the station all about? And with you guys every week mentioning Tough TV, it's the visibility that you give us. So it works well for, I think, you, the show, and for us at the same time.
Yeah. Now, for people outside of the Central Florida area, I mentioned early on about all the different venues that are out there. If somebody in Miami wants to look at Tough TV 38, is there a way for them to find it?
Well, what people can do is go to toughtv.com, TUFFTV.com, and look under affiliates. And Lou was on Ted Turner's old channel, WTBS, on a digital channel. Now the channels are all multiplex. You just don't have one channel. You could have several. So he's in Atlanta, I believe, up north, out west. So they just have to go to take a look at it that way.
Yeah, toughtv.com, and then follow the prompts, and then they can find most of the programming. Yeah.
Right. I think if they go to the Tough TV 38 website, that they can see some of your shows too.
Ah, okay.
You have some interesting ideas for future programming as well. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the tailgating show is definitely one that I think is a real winner. I think people, they're very passionate about their sports. They get into it. So I really want to develop a show with following that train of thought. And Al, when you and I went out to UCF and did just a demo, I mean, you saw the response. So there's a great response with people going out, having a good time, and it's kind of refreshing and with all the news events and the depressing situations that you're seeing, that we can go out to a sporting event, and it's very uplifting. People
It was positive, and we need more positive type programming. I think a lot of times everything skews negative, and because they're trying to get emotional response from the audience. But I think if you can do the same thing with positive programming, you have another show with that you're developing with a psychic, right?
Yeah, Rosemary Altea. She's a famous psychic from Wales, and she's been on Larry King, Oprah, and she's a very nice lady. And it was some of the things that she comes up with, you kind of have to wonder how that happens. And I believe that there's things that are around us that we don't see. There's some people that are like the radio receiver, and there's radio waves out there. We're surrounded with radio waves all around, but we can't tune in.
And hold that thought, because we're going to talk about your grandparents in the next segment and some psychic stuff that's happened to you.
We're taking the Florida Roundtable. Radio takes a look at TV. In this edition, you are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is the general manager of Tough TV 38, Mr. Will Strickler. And if you will stay put, our conversation continues following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm political commentator Al Spry. It's great to be here, Reagan, again on Tough TV and on Florida's News Network and 80 stations across the state. We do this every week. It's our roundup, and we're rounding it up this time.
Yes, we certainly are. Pleasure to be with you.
Winner of the week politically is George Sheldon, last year's Democratic candidate for Attorney General. He's always been better at actually doing his myriad public service jobs than actually getting elected. But now Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner, a Republican, has selected Sheldon to be the new head of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services.
You know, George Sheldon has run for almost every cabinet office that the state of Florida has over the years, aside from having served in the state legislature. Now, I wonder if he's moving to Illinois. Does that mean we're not going to see him on the ballot anymore here?
That's pretty much the case, I think. I think we're done with the name George Sheldon on a ballot.
It's been around a long time.
Also, we have, of course, the advocates for expanded health care coverage. And the Obama administration's reluctance to extend funding for the low-income pool program that helps hospitals treat uninsured patients has opened $1.3 billion hole in the budget. And the news likely reopens a conversation in Tallahassee over the state GOP's refusal to expand Medicaid. So they are also a winner. We had two winners this week.
Okay.
Also, there's a bill going through the Florida legislature about police cameras affixed to the bodies of officers so that if any shenanigans goes on, which occasionally happens, rarely, but occasionally, they have it on camera. Well, the police union doesn't like this idea.
I don't think that's a surprise.
And of course, they're not saying the actual reason they don't like it, which is they don't want their cops being spied on all the time and every action being monitored. They're using privacy concerns, which is another way for saying the same thing. But the Representative Shervin Jones, who's Democrat from West Park, is responding to the key question posed by the Florida Police Benevolent Association, which is, when should body cameras be turned on? His answer, per the amended language now, he's changed it, is simple: during law enforcement-related encounters and activities. Jones's bill, which is HB 57, requires police departments and sheriff's offices that implement body cameras to put in place specific policies related to privacy, data retention, and training. It's been watered down significantly since he filed it to require all police officers in Florida to wear the cameras. This amendment, if approved, would address one of two privacy concerns that have been raised. The other relates to citizens' privacy, as police often interact with people in sensitive situations, and Florida's public records laws are more open than most. So we'll see where that one goes.
I have two questions that I haven't seen anybody address yet in this issue. And that is, if we go ahead with these body cams, does that replace the dash cams that many departments already have?
I believe that's separate. I think the dash cams already
they're going to stay
enforcement. So
yeah, they are. That's what I'm saying. If they do body cams, are they going to do away with the dash cams?
I would think not. I would think it's be two different angles. You know, you have the officer's angle of the what he's doing, and then you also have the camera from the vehicle. So I think it would just, you know what? I don't understand why any cop or a police organization would be afraid, unless there's something to hide, of having cameras on officers. So I'm in the camp of put cameras on them.
Yeah. The other question I haven't seen answered yet is, how much is this going to cost us?
That is true.
No,
that
it's
is
not
true.
going to be cheap.
It probably won't, but you know what? It probably won't be more than all these red light cameras they have everywhere that's ruining everybody's privacy. I don't see any unions standing up for people and talking about those.
Yeah, a couple of cities in Central Florida have actually gotten rid of them or ended the contracts, but boy, there's more growing than there is canceling.
Well, I sure wish Apopka, Florida would do so, but they seem to be adding more every day.
And this place called Maitland,
Yes.
Yes. Well, all right. Tell you what, we have to drive through there every day, so but we'll remind you that you are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. We're going to do something a little bit different for you today, and we have invited the general manager of Tough TV 38 to join us in the studio. Mr. Will Strickler is here, and we're gonna find out the things that are on his mind as our conversation continues. Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
I am broadcaster and raconteur Al Spry. We have our friend Will Strickler in the studio today. That's right, Mr. Tough TV himself.
Yes, the general manager of TV 38 here in the Orlando area. We've been on there for over a year now, and we're going to find out more about the TV station and the point of view and background of its general manager. And I think you're going to find it's a fascinating conversation. So we'll invite you to pull up a chair, put an ear on the radio. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.